Hi, I'm Hardik and I'm the founder CEO at Seneca, which is a data company. I had some takes that I want to share with the industry at large about what I think about the Windsurf and OpenAI failed acquisition. Seneca is an open source platform, right? And the fork uh, on which Windsurf is built upon is VS Code, which is also an open source code editor. The reason Windsurf's acquisition fell through was because OpenAI was not ready to, acquire the company given Microsoft's access to Windsurf's IP, which meant as soon as OpenAI would have acquired Windsurf, Microsoft would have rolled that in to GitHub Copilot, and there would be no alpha left for OpenAI to extract from Windsurf's technology. Given that, I think the reason why uh, something like windsurf is going to become a rarity in the coming future is because the platform on which it is built upon, open source, is not really open source in the sense it is free for access to everybody, but it is free to also be exploited by its creator, right? So if you build something on top of it and it exceeds the utilization of what VS Code itself is. So what I mean by that is, let's say VS Code's utility in some abstract unit is 1, and a Windsurf's utility in the same abstract unit is 2 or 2.5, right? Because of the added benefit to AI, etc. There is some threshold where this benefit becomes so significant that the initial provider of the open source technology is now discontent with what is being done with their tech, right? So this threshold for, let's say, Windsurf was reached because the utility provided by Microsoft's VS Code was so far below what Windsurf was providing on top of VS Code that Microsoft would have rolled that in and would have basically uh, collapsed Windsurf as its own platform. And this is going to become the norm in the coming future, right? So why I think that is because the the benefit with open source for big tech companies previously was that they get to build a community around developers through that platform, while also knowing that all of the benefits that they extract from this platform, they'll probably be the ones to extract it, right? Because of the resources, of the tech, of the talent, of the time, of the money that they have, it was much more likely rather that the next big thing, even in open source, would have come through these large companies. With AI, however, the problem is that AI is such a powerful generator of alpha that fast moving come first teams often catch that worm much earlier than big tech slower firms could, even though they use the same underlying technology, right? So that is what happened with Windsurf, Cursor, etc. on top of VS Code. And if this continues, because it is unlikely that big tech would ever be able to match the speed that a small startup, a small team could match. By the definition of a big tech company, there's a lot of, you know, uh, there's some economies of scale, but there's also a lot of inefficiencies of scale that come into play. Given that to be the case, I think we're at the point where in the next 2 to 3 years, open source contributions largely by big tech is going to absolutely stop, because they know that as soon as they release something that is for the people, people are going to use it, and people, because of the community that they built around it, people will eventually build something that is at least 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x, 10x better than what the initial platform was, and this multiplier would only grow with time, with access to models, etc. Right? So that is my take. And now, why should you even listen to me? Um, because I think I'm on both ends of this spectrum, right? So as someone who's building open source, I one, I understand the problems that would come with building something open source, which is primarily that everything that you've put hours and weeks and months into understanding, one, planning, two, creating, three, then of course implementing and dishing it out and maintaining it, is accessed within seconds through GitHub, through whatever, to people, and people who have different set of priorities can still use that platform to build something that would have taken you much more time due to different set of priorities, different set of incentives. So that's, and I think even as a small developer of this, I think I can understand that, and I'm sure for big tech this makes a lot more sense and is much more tangible to them than it is to me. But on the other end, open source has also allowed me to build a lot of stuff much, much, much earlier than otherwise. The best example of this, all of my front end is written in TypeScript, right? TypeScript is an open source language built on top of JavaScript by Microsoft. My go-to editor of choice now is OpenCode, which is another open source provision, right? I use a lot of open source stuff. So LangGraph, for example, LangGraph is something that I tend to use. Not sure if it's open source, but it's definitely free and definitely very approachable for a dev. So all of this ecosystem is built upon open source of some sort, and this will collapse unless something very significant happens to incentivize big tech to keep making this as they keep moving forward. So that's just a small rant on what I think is happening in tech.